Ferguson, Missouri. I'd like to start, before I even intro my talk today, by sharing a book that was actually today arrived in my mailbox. And it is an edited book on Trayvon Martin, and a colleague, Dr. Kenny Varner at LSU, edited this book, and he is the co-editor with me on the Michael Brown book. And what's so tragic is we're having a discussion about Michael, and this has just come out. And you all know Trayvon Martin, the case that happened in Sanford, Florida, in 2012. So believe it or not, two years later, in 2014, we're having this discussion. And I would suspect we'll continue to have this discussion. But let's get to the material at hand. I titled my talk tonight with you, Everytown, USA. Because as a critical race theorist, we theorize and we believe firmly and confidently that racism is ordinary. It's ordinary. It's normal. And so critical race theorists talk about racism incessantly. Because we see it displayed in overt and covert ways. Subtitled, Is Ferguson Normal? Could this happen to you? And so I'm going to situate my remarks this evening within a personal story. And then from there, extend and interject relationships that I see in the Michael Brown case, as well as the Trayvon Martin case, as well as you all as students, faculty, and staff, community members here at the university and Bloomington Normal. So let's begin there. To contextualize my story, Angela and Ashley put together handouts, and they talk about the super predator myth. And I want to start there because in the 90s, this was a real phenomenon that was getting a lot of play in the media. A Princeton professor, a criminologist, was studying crime rates, and what he was seeing really led to the creation of this myth. And it was strictly speaking about juvenile delinquency, in particular a racialized form in which African Americans were theorized to be more deviant and more prone to commit criminal acts, and they should be watched out for. They're dangerous. Excuse me. And so the super predator myth is an important place to begin, even before I start my personal story, because of the misperception and how media really conditions us to internalize and believe these myths, even as people of color, sadly. And so I wonder with Mike Brown, what would come to mind? The picture of, a scholar on the left, or, the picture on the right. And so in my talk this evening, I'm going to share a few things, in particular the third bullet point on the bottom, racial battle fatigue. But towards the end of tonight's program, we can talk specifically about stereotype threat in the classroom and in the workplace, as well as microaggressions, micro-invalidations, and micro-insults. Okay. So tonight, I want to share my experiences as a faculty member at Illinois State University, a primarily white institution. My focus tonight will be on how my identity as a transracial adoptee has impacted my racial socialization, as well as how I fueled my desire to study racism formally as an academic. I will begin my story by sharing my background and my educational experiences. Then I will discuss specific experiences here at Illinois State University, where I have worked for the last 2.5 years as a pre-tenure assistant professor of educational foundations. In fact, I was hired. The job description that I applied for said critical race theory. So if I ever get in trouble for talking about racism, I always look at that. I have it stapled behind my desk to remind me that I was hired here to talk about racism. Following this discussion of real incidents, I will close with my thoughts on racial battle fatigue, as I mentioned here, and the importance of how faculty of color respond to racial microaggressions and also do a more effective job of teaching students of color and minoritized students here on campus. Okay, I'll begin. So how we talk or don't talk about race and racism in the United States. Okay. My white adopted parents adopted me when I was 15 months old. I grew up in the segregated suburban communities all my life, where I attended mostly white K-12 schools and was taught to buy into the myth that society was colorblind. Anyone raise your hand if you've heard of that? Like, I don't see color, people use that garbage. Now there is a real thing called colorblindness. Like, you can't see colors, and if that's for you, then yes, you could be literally colorblind. But in the racial sense, there's no such thing. It's foolishness, right? My socially segregated experiences, exacerbated by being raised by colorblind parents, played influential roles in my racial socialization, right? I was raised and educated according to the typical ways that race is or is not talked about in the United States, right? It's almost a taboo subject, right, in America today, to talk about race. It makes us feel uncomfortable. My adopted parents, like many white families, did not talk about race in the home because in their minds we are all equal and we all have opportunities. There was a code of silence, if you will, and breaking that silence was understood to be rude and disrespectful. It wasn't until 2006 when I graduated with my bachelor's degree in elementary teaching that I finally realized that not talking about my racialized experiences was killing me silently. What do I mean by that? Well, we'll get there. Since I could not confide in my adopted white parents, they couldn't recognize neither the subtleties of racism nor their own white privilege. I tended to bottle my feelings up inside. Any of you bottle your feelings up inside? Like, 1, 2, 3, it just builds up, right? My growing awareness of racism is what motivated me to pursue graduate level education. I earned my master's degree in 2008 and then continued on for a PhD in 2012. It was during my doctoral coursework, so if you're not a doc student, you're getting a free lesson here. If you're a bachelor's student, you're getting a free lesson here. That I learned more formally about racial battle fatigue, right? So while completing my doctoral studies at Milwaukee, I began to better understand how racism could actually kill individuals prematurely, right? That sounds radical, but it's not really radical when you hear what I'm about to say. What Arlene Geronimus and others have identified as racial weathering. By a show of hands, have any of you heard of that term, racial weathering? Okay. It's the notion of like houses that weather, right? The siding gets beat with snow and ice, and it slowly fades and the house weathers. It's the same physiologically and physically to our own body in terms of our health, and it can lead to death prematurely. So, studying racism formally in coursework such as critical multicultural education, critical race theory, anti-racist pedagogy, culturally relevant pedagogy proved helpful and enlightening for me as an adopted person, right? The academic language I gained helped me articulate and contextualize what racial battle fatigue that I was experiencing on a day-to-day basis, right? Also, having been trained by a critical race theorist, I was forewarned about the realities that came with being a tenure-track faculty member of color in the academy, right? Basically, Nicholas, this is what's going to go down. You think it's going to be this way, but I'm forewarning you, you will experience, you know the lesson, right? The line. I took my mentor's advice seriously when my family and I relocated to Bloomington Normal. In 2012, I was hired as an assistant professor of Educational Foundations here at ISU. All right, let's fast forward to ISU. Illinois State University is a far cry from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, right? Bloomington Normal is less urban. I've heard people say it's urban. I was just coming back with my students and I were up in Chicago for 3 days. Yeah, that's another story. The College of Education at Illinois State University in no way really resembled the urban preparation institution and the focus there at Milwaukee, right? So let me share some first encounters with racial data fatigue, and then I'll interject my thoughts with Michael Brown. Okay. My first encounter with racial data fatigue at Illinois State occurred the first time I walked into the department office. Mind you, I was 28 years of age then. And this was a few weeks before my first semester here. As I entered the copy and mail room, I was met with a nasty look. Almost as if the person staring at me was asking, "Who the hell are you? Why the hell are you in this room?" The professor who gave me the dirty eye was a white, and I'm not going to share any more details for anonymity, but my new colleague, right, did not say hello, but instead walked out as I entered. Nearly a year and a half later, not much has changed. Another professor, this time a white male, again, I will not fill in the details, has walked past me in the hallway on more than one occasion without even acknowledging my existence. In fact, one time I intentionally made eye contact with the gentleman and loudly said, "Hello," to which he looked down at the floor and said nothing. Now, frequent silent encounters like these in public spaces, like the department, copy room, and mail room in the hallways, right, notify faculty of color, and certainly students, right, who work in primarily white institutions like ISU, that they are not welcome. Encounters like the ones I just pointed out are instances of racial microaggressions. Precisely because there are so many ways one could interpret my colleagues' responses. Could the woman who looked at me in the copy room simply have been in a bad mood? It's possible. Unrelated about my entrance, right? Is it possible that the male professor in the hallway simply had not heard me when I said hello? I mean, he was fairly old. Maybe, his hearing aid wasn't picking up my hello, but we don't know. We don't know. All of these explanations are valid and plausible, right? Now, Sue, an academic at Teachers College, states that microaggressions are quagmires for faculty of color because they cannot be easily dismissed, and a chasm exists between the racial realities of whites and people of color. Now, for instance, did the white person actually do or say something racist? Or did the person of color misinterpret what the white person's actions or behaviors or comments said, right? Indeed, if a white colleague had been the recipient of the cold or dismissive behaviors chronicled just now, then of course, there would be no doubt that those behaviors were motivated by some other cause, right? This is the quandary for faculty of color. There is always the additional possibility that such behaviors might not have been so innocent, might have been motivated by racial prejudice or even subconsciously when we talk about implicit bias, right? A white faculty member's mind might race through several possibilities. This is what he or she might think. Is it my gender? Is it my age? Is it that I'm a newbie? Is it my sexual orientation? Do they not like the way I dress? The way I talk? The way I smell? My cologne. They might not like my cologne. Are they just that way toward everybody, right? A faculty member of color at PWI, however, is haunted by and must contend with an additional layer of possibility. Is it my race? Pure and simple. This is a scenario from which perhaps faculty of color can never feel totally secure. Surely this is what the families of Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown experienced when their loved ones were murdered by police, right? Same goes for students, right? You just got here because of affirmative action. You really shouldn't be here, right? Things like that. Let me talk to you about a chilly racial climate, as I call it. My experiences with racial data fatigue have ebbed and flowed during my brief time here at ISU. I recall informing, again, I won't mention who, during my first semester that a picture on my office door had been vandalized. Someone had scrawled upon a picture of me holding my youngest daughter. When I showed the picture to her, she asked if I wanted to report it to campus security, to which I replied, "How would that help?" Again, I won't fill in the details of who, but this person was perplexed by my response. From this person's perspective, it was logical and sensible to file a record of complaint. While I agree that filing a complaint is logical, my response was really one of frustration, right? For me, racial battle fatigue is about exactly this, the racial battle that every day I must face and endure whether I want to or not. Some of you students experience that on a day-to-day basis with your white professors. After I related this experience of having my door vandalized to fellow colleagues at the university who are also minorities and also minoritized, right, there's a difference, they immediately informed me that they too have experienced similar vandalism, which is so powerful about this situation, this event. So when we start sharing, you can understand that you're normal, and what you're experiencing, other people are experiencing. You're not special. They don't simply just pick on you. They pick on a lot of people, right? So. One colleague even told me that someone had hung a fake noose near her office door. This African-American faculty member filed a complaint, and lo and behold, nothing happened. No one was apprehended. Thus, my quip, how would that help, stems from the frustration that arises when history repeats itself again, again, and again. How many more dead black boys do we need? Right? And that's precisely with the police. It's not shocking that certain and some African Americans do not trust the police. Because to paraphrase James Baldwin, they see what they do on a day-to-day basis. I cannot believe what you do because I see what you say because I see what you do. That was a famous line he said, right? At that moment in time, I felt like Fannie Lou Hamer, who once said that she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. In many ways, racial battle fatigue is exactly that for me. I'm going to fast forward it. The 6 pages, I thought I would have a lot of time. I'm seeing my time winding down. I want to share one more story for you, and then interject my thoughts about Mike Brown and the application we have here at ISU. Hypersurveillance. Another incident that occurred at ISU involved my research. I was making copies of textbooks to be analyzed for a book I was writing with a graduate student. As I was leaving the copy room, again, I won't call attention to the person, but someone called out for me to stop. This person mentioned that I should be aware of copyright laws, to which I replied that I was confused. She noted that I appeared to be copying large amounts from a curriculum guide, and asked if I was aware that there were certain percentage rules and how much I could legally reproduce, etc., etc. Again, I expressed my confusion. I explained that the copies in question were, in fact, data that my co-author and I were analyzing for a book we were writing.